Good evening. The time is 6:30, April 1st. We'll call this meeting of the Lakewood Planning Commission to order. Please call the roll.
Robert Estrada.
Here.
Christian Flores.
Here.
Katie Crook. Lynn Larson. Jim Merritt.
Here.
Sharon Wallace. Here. You have quorum, Chair.
Outstanding. I'm also here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. For the record. If you all please join me, stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
The
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hope you all had an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting. If so, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes. So move. I have a second. Second. There's been motion and seconded to approve the minutes from March 18th, 2026. All those in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion carries. The meeting minutes are approved. Ms. Spear, do we have any updates for tonight's agenda?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I would ask that we move number 1 down below number 4. So we will start with number 2 and then move down in order from there.
Outstanding.
And with that, if you're ready for me to do so, I'm ready to start.
Yep, I think so. Nobody
Okay.
online for public comment?
I'm sorry, no, there's no one online for public comment.
I just want to make sure there's not anybody hiding in the hallway for public comment. Hello?
No.
All right, we'll close the public comment. Ms. Spear, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tonight we're going to start with a presentation that continues into a little more detail of the discussion regarding the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program. And some of this we talked about in the past. Some of this is going to be brand new for some of our new Planning Commission members. And some of this was introduced at the last meeting, but we're reinforcing a few things and asking you a few more questions. So, sorry, I'm gonna get this out of the way for everybody. There we go, and here we go. There have been a number of things over the last 3 or 4 years now that the city has been doing, first proactively and then in reaction to state law changes regarding climate change. And so this first thing on this screen here is the result of a couple of years worth of work that was ultimately a city council ordinance to update our comprehensive plan to incorporate energy and climate change element. But it also included the adoption of a work plan, which includes 15 items here. And as you'll see on the right-hand side, most of them are done. You have 5 that are ongoing, and then there's just one that has not started yet because it's a regional task, the Regional Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Strategy, and that is pending the work that's going on at the county and state level. But as you can see here, there is information about transportation, greenhouse gas emissions, looking at environmental protection updates, incorporating environmental justice into our code and our actions, updating our tree preservation code, and more. Also,
Commissioner Estrada.
who completed the action. These were pretty much all city actions. The ones that were identified were done through staff implementation or council action. So this isn't, other than the tree preservation code, which is number 10, most of this, if not all of it, is work that's done by the city staff. Absolutely. Also in 2022, as part of that tree preservation code update, there was a tree canopy assessment done. And it was all through LiDAR, electronic overview from the top of the GIS work. And so it wasn't on the ground, in other words. And so it was a higher level analysis that we've since had refined. But in 2022, the conclusions were that you had up on the top right there, about 38% of the city's acreage was impervious. Herbaceous and grass was 26.5%. Tree canopy was about 24%. Water was about 9%. And then you had some smaller ones as well. And then where you look to see where the tree canopy was located, 72% of it was on private property, and then 28% was on public property. The tree advisory committee that was convened as part of the update to our tree regulations actually went through a series of criteria to decide where to prioritize tree planting. And so what you see here on this map on the right in turquoise are those areas of the city that are prioritized for tree planting through our urban management plan, urban forest management plan, and then also seeking cooperation with private property owners to add vegetation and trees on their property as well. The following year, in 2023, the city commissioned through the UW Public Policy School a guide of how to create an urban forestry program. And so that report was issued, and it's got some recommendations that we have been implementing since. And we also actually use the recommendations regarding community engagement, public outreach efforts on some of our other initiatives as well, because it was basically good advice on how to get people that might not otherwise be at the table involved. The following year, in 2024, that was the year where we had to do our 10-year full review of the entire comprehensive plan. And as part of that process, we had some changes to our energy and climate change element. And you see some new and related policies that were adopted related to what you're now going to be asked to be doing going forward with the Natural and Environment and Climate Change Program. So especially greenhouse gas emission goals, meeting those, improving clean and efficient transportation options, increasing sustainable and energy efficient systems, and then on the bottom one in particular, improving the tree canopy. That same comprehensive plan, full review and update in 24 also added a new natural environment element to our comprehensive plan. And just a reminder, if you think of that rainbow that I've sometimes used as the reference point, you've got state law, you've got regional policy, you've got state law, regional policy, the city's comprehensive plan, which is really policies other than land use zoning, which is you will do or you should do, you are encouraged to do. And then you have the development regulations that implement all of those higher levels. So when I talk about the comprehensive plan, these are the policies that our city council has adopted that either are mandatory or recommend action. And so here we're talking about this new natural environment element where it's maintaining an urban forestry program, maintaining a city tree fund, working on a citywide goal of a 40% tree canopy cover by 2050, and then looking at environmental equity when looking at tree distribution, and then also air quality standards. So reducing pollutants in the air as well as increasing urban greenery to help with air quality. That 24 tree canopy assessment went through by zone and said how much in each one of the land use zone types there was of tree canopy. And so on the left side, you'll see it in text. On the right side, you see the map. The darker blue is where there's more tree cover. The lighter colors are where there's less. And what you see is essentially the I-5 corridor and lands to the east are where most of the low tree canopy cover is. And the highest tree canopy cover is basically right down the middle of the city, if you will, around the larger lakes and water bodies. A third piece that happened in 2024 was the Heat Watch report, where we had volunteers from the city residents actually go out and drive a path morning, afternoon, and evening of a particular day in August that was going to be the hottest day of the year. And the results here are shown, the orange and reds and, excuse me, are the higher temperatures, the blue is the lower. And again, you kind of see that same pattern as you saw here, where you've got lower tree canopy, you in turn have higher temperature. That's not the only reason why those changes are there, but it's certainly a correlation. Then in 2023, the state adopted a new law, and I'll just call it House Bill 1181, but it is including a lot of things that local governments have to do by mid-2029 to comply with requirements for climate change planning. And so within our comprehensive plan and then related development regulations, in particular, there needs to be addressing greenhouse gas emission reductions. And in Lakewood, just to cut to the chase, the majority of the greenhouse gas emissions are from transportation and then buildings. And then also trying to reduce essentially single occupancy vehicle miles traveled. And then the other thing is looking for resiliency to climate impacts and natural hazards. We have been awarded a grant from the state to comply with this new state law. The first 2 years are already complete. We're in the middle of our second biennium, and then we'll have a third, which is mid-27 through mid-29, to complete the work required under 1181. So going by those bienniums, in 2025, last year, there was already a completion of what's required in our parks and recreation element, and then most of the work for both utilities and capital facilities were finished, including inventories of what's in the city, what's planned. What needs to still happen is the capacity analysis for both of the utilities and capital facilities items, and that'll happen in the next biennium. What we're doing now, and why we are talking so much about trees and urban forestry at the moment, is we're in the middle of this second biennium's work, which is looking at the energy and climate change element. And in particular, the city has to create new sub-elements within it that address greenhouse gas emissions, as well as climate change and resiliency again. And then also looking at our land use element to make sure that there are community and urban forests identified and incorporating environmental justice into that element. Also looking at a strategy to address the city's urban heat islands. Coming up with municipal climate resilient and native planting plans for municipal projects. And then also creating and maintaining an urban forestry program and master reforestation plan. So this is the focus right now of what the task forces will be dealing with and what you would be involved with as well. Just as a heads up, from mid-27 to 29, the next group of task forces, the next area of focus will be transportation. And it's going to be updating the demand forecast within the city. It's also going to be looking at multimodal level of service. So multimodal, not only cars, but bike, ped, anything that's essentially not a car will be addressed in this one. And then also, actually another item you're talking about tonight, making sure that we have an American with Disabilities Act transition plan. There will also be electric vehicle infrastructure plan created, and then that capacity analysis that's still needed for utilities and capital facilities. So just kind of bringing it back to the graphic about the program, you've got trees, data, community, and climate all incorporated into natural environment and climate change program for Lakewood. Trees, it's the comprehensive plan goals about an urban forestry program and also increasing the tree canopy. And then it's those state requirements that I just went through. For climate, you've got, again, the city has its own climate goals already in its comprehensive plan, but then there's those state laws that the city has to specifically comply with by mid-2029. Data, there's quite a bit. I walked through most of these already, but since 2021, there's been a number of major initiatives to gather information so we can turn around and then start to create programs or update things that are already in place. And then community, this is where we're going to be taking advantage of that implementation guide provided to us by UW-Evans School. We're going to be looking at public involvement and environmental justice comprehensive plan goals, the state requirements regarding community involvement, And then in 2026, the council direction that's now been provided to all of us. So here's you. You are the Planning Commission, and this is the role that you're going to be playing. Right now, you already do this. You advise the city council on everything that's within your scope. You will do things where it's an informational thing only, or there'll be times when you hold a public hearing and then take action through resolution on a recommendation that goes up to the city council. They review that, they deliberate it, they have their own public hearings, and then they take action. There may be times when the city council accepts everything as is recommended by Planning Commission, but there is the ability of the city council to make amendments, just like if something were recommended to you by a task force, you would be able to make changes as well before forwarding it to the council. But as the advisory body here, you're looking already at comprehensive plan and zoning, development regulations, and infrastructure and capital facilities. The new thing is this natural environment and climate change program piece. Gathering public input, you already do this as well. You have your public hearings, you have your public comment option every time we meet. And then the only thing new here is going to be these task force meetings, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. And then the other big new thing is convening these task forces that the city council has asked you to convene starting in 2026. We've got them broken out into 4 topic areas. So heat mitigation, the urban forest management plan, the changes that are required to the city's climate element in its comprehensive plan, and then developing both a 3 to 5 year work plan and also a 10-year longer term, more visionary plan. So these are the 4 task forces that are going to be meeting between now and mid-2027 with your involvement and oversight. So what is the same for you? You're going to be doing much of what you already do. You're already involved in land use, capital facilities, utilities, transportation, and critical area regulation. You're already involved in redevelopment topics as well as transportation. What's new, really, it's the task forces, and then coming up with, once you hear back from them, the recommendations that you would forward on to the city council specifically regarding what the task forces have provided to you. So there's 4 task forces, as I mentioned. The first one that's going to begin to meet is going to start in May, and it's going to be the one that covers the development of a 10-year implementation plan, as well as that 3 to 5 year work plan. I mentioned at the very start of this that there was a 3-year plan adopted in 22. It sunsetted in 25. It was done, and as I mentioned, all but 1 have been either completed or are ongoing. But there's going to be a new work plan created, and then that longer term implementation plan will come. Let's see. So the 10-year plan will include strategies, long-term timelines and benchmarks, implementation ideas, and developing a monitoring and evaluation framework. So over time, the city can track how it's doing on progress. The 3 to 5 year work plan will be more specific and more strategic. It's going to be looking at the goals that have already been identified through several things: that original comp plan element, the action items that the 15 came from in 2022, the ordinance that included that 3-year work plan, and then since then we've had state law dropped in as well. The second task force, this is one that is probably going to have the heaviest load, is going to be the one that's looking at the creation of 2 sub-elements within the climate element. One is specifically related to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, and the other is climate resiliency, including hazards like extreme heat and wildfire smoke. But you'll see here that there's 11 sectors that all need to be addressed as part of this element. So agriculture and food, buildings and energy, cultural resources, economic development, emergency management, health and well-being, ecosystems, transportation, waste management, water resources, zoning and development, and then cross-cutting among all of those things. So again, this one will be a little bit later. It's planned at this point to start in June, but it will probably have the most number of meetings, and we'll see how many of our folks that have volunteered to be part of this whole process want to jump on board with this task force. The third is going to be focused on the urban forest management plan. And at this point, that is intended to start in July, but it's going to run through probably October, and there will be meetings in August. So just a heads up, you have historically had August off, your regular meeting cycle, but this task force is probably going to have a meeting in August. So just a heads up there. This is looking at all of the data that's been collected since 2022 regarding the urban forestry canopy in the city. It's going to be looking at goals and maybe updating those goals. It's going to be looking at invasive species and those risks that they cause to our urban forestry in the city. Looking at purposes for the city's tree fund and identifying expenditures that are going to be happening in the near future. It's going to look at public education and then voluntary tree planting on private property, coming up with strategies to reach out to the public in order to have that be a successful piece to this whole thing. The final task force is related to heat mitigation, and there's actually a number of subtopics all related to that. This is one that's going to meet kind of with a gap in the summertime, but it's scheduled to have a meeting in June and then come back in September. But as you can see here, urban heat resilience, land use, waste heat reduction, climate resilient plantings, infrastructure, emergency preparedness, and helping vulnerable populations, and then data and monitoring are all topics that this task force is going to be addressing. So the next steps, and this first one is one that you're actually going to be doing review of tonight, is you need to update your rules of procedure to allow more than 5 members, because I think these task forces will end up being larger than that. You also need to be identifying which of you are going to be liaisons to any of the task forces. And that action doesn't need to happen tonight, but maybe with a little more detail now in your mind, you start to figure out which one you may be interested in engaging with. And then the task force members, what we have done is sought out people that are generally interested in this project. And we have over 20 either organizations or individuals who have identified themselves. What we're going to do is now reach out to them and say, okay, we're kicking off. Which of these task forces would you like to be part of? And let them self-identify as the first step. Depending on the responses back, hopefully we're not going to have everybody on one task force and everything else is empty, but we'll see how that plays out. We'll kind of work with that. And so by the time we come back to you on April 15th, we'll have better detail for you on who, how many are on each of those task forces, and also maybe finalizing on the 15th, which of you may be involved in any of those task forces as well.
Ms. Beer, I believe we have a question.
Sure.
Will we have a member of the city council on each one of those task forces?
They are not at this point intending to be
as
part
we
of that.
Discussed last meeting?
That is not
They
something
refu-
that the council's going to do.
They refused us?
They are not going to do that. They asked you to handle this issue.
So where did that thought go?
I'm sorry?
Where did that thought go then? That we would have a city
When you provided that to me, sir, I took it up to city staff, higher than me up the ladder. And looking at the direction from the city council that this is something that the planning commission is going to handle, the city council is not going to be involved.
So our request did not go to the city council?
Not directly from
Not
me,
at the
no.
Staff level? Thank you.
Yep. And you're welcome to reach out to them, but I can tell you that's the response you're going to get. So any other questions or thoughts out of what I just provided to you? All right. So I'm sorry.
I don't believe we have any questions, Ms. Beer.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is go back, if you would indulge, Mr. Chair, since Weston Ott is here to go over the ADA transition plan, and then we'll keep going down the agenda, and then we'll come back to this topic. So maybe kind of think about if you want to talk about which task forces you want to be on or not. But otherwise, I'll invite Mr. Ott up to the podium if you're ready for that, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Mr. Ott, welcome.
Oops, let me get you on. Yeah, 1 second.
Are you able to hear me? Yep, sounds like it. So,
Gotcha.
well, good evening, and I apologize for not being here promptly at 6:30. I was actually upstairs signing standard plans, and we'll talk about that in the update here in the presentation. And also, thank you for being part of the public comment, public involvement portion of the ADA transition plan, as we're planning to have a hearing on the plan next meeting. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Okay. I'm trying to,
Yeah, can you move it?
how was that?
Better.
So last time I was here, we went over the plan in general. So the left side of the slide in front of you there is really a refresher, a reminder of what we went over last week. The plan's a requirement of the law related to ADA. Cities with more than 50 employees, which Lakewood definitely qualifies for. And again, I just want to make sure it's clear that we're talking about ADA transition within the right of way. So we're not talking the city as an entirety. We're focusing on in the right of way. So that's what's on the right side is what's in this plan, and it's the things that you would commonly think of: pedestrian ramps, sidewalks, our crossings, our pedestrian push buttons, and any other route that the pedestrian would take within the right of way. So again, we're not looking at items that aren't in the right of way. And this would include roads that are upcoming as well. So as an example, Kendrick, which we talked about last meeting. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is some summary statistics from our 2021 rating of the infrastructure in the right of way. So you can see we have a sizable amount of sidewalk in the city. Doing the math with that, we have 180 center line miles of road within the city, or 436 lane miles of road. But if you take the 180 lane miles and make the assumption that sidewalks on both sides, the city's really close to 20% sidewalk. And that's something the city needs to be proud of. When we incorporated, it was really our roadway was in that county format of, you know, lanes, wedge curb, gravel behind the wedge curb. We've really made strides, especially on our major arterials like South Tacoma Way, Pack Highway, Bridgeport, Gravelly. I could just go on naming them. So a lot to be proud of, and it's always good to look at the summary statistics. We have a number of curb ramps that go with that sidewalk, our pedestrian push buttons that are traffic signals, and then corresponding driveways to access the right of way. And when we did that rating, we looked at the condition and came up with a logical rating system, and you can see it there in the bottom right, a color-coded format. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So talking a little bit about design standards and our policy. I also want to start with not using jargon and acronyms. I apologize for using that last time, but PROWAG stands for Public Rights of Way Access Guidelines. And really that process began in 1999, and the U.S. Access Board adopted that in August 2023. The city also has done the same. And you can see here, I won't read through all these items in each column. But just recently, it was March, I believe it was March 3rd, the council adopted the update to Title 12, the Engineering Standards Manual, and the Engineering Standards Plan, or Standard Plans. Those go into effect May 3rd of this year. So we're getting ready to launch that. And part of that review was also checking for compliance with ADA, and basically everything was within compliance. The minor changes were addressed in that process. I might also add that one item you'll see up there listed is the WashDOT Design Manual. That's part of our engineering standards, and in that, chapter 15 talks about ADA of the WashDOT design manual, but it also references ProWeg. So the city does follow ProWeg if that question comes up. So we'll go to the next slide. So how do these improvements get made? Well, there's a number of different ways. We are going to make a request in the next budget cycle. City of Lakewood, as you know, does a 2-year budget, biennial budget. So there'll be a request made for funds for standalone ADA improvements to remove those barriers. And again, we don't, I want to be careful how I categorize it, but we don't really have a overwhelmingly large amount of barriers because we've built so much is new ped ramps, sidewalks, et cetera, new signals. We also address these through our capital programs. We address many things, both the needs that have identified why that's in our transportation improvement plan, as well as our budgeted capital improvement plan. It takes care of a host of things, whether it's ADA, roadway, surface conditions, et cetera. So that's another way we knock off ADA items that need to be upgraded. And then also part of our maintenance program. So kind of a typical complaint that might come in would be the sidewalk is faulted due to tree roots. We've all seen this, especially in older cities that have large mature trees that will sometimes push up sidewalk panels. Those are addressed often through the city's My 311 system. Operations and maintenance will either address it themselves through just grinding the concrete, or maybe it's bringing in a contractor to remove a sidewalk panel and re-pour it. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. If we have a standalone overlay program, one of the recent ones would have been 108th. As part of that process, we'll upgrade the pedestrian ramps because we've affected those ramps that are along the overlaid area. And often that's things like the slope may not be right, or last week I had mentioned the truncated domes are missing. Those are the yellow tiles for those that are sight impaired to help them cross the road. And then the last one is part of development. And that can even take the form of, let's say there's existing frontage improvements, but the sidewalk cross slope is inadequate or above standards. Then part of their requirement of the development would be to remove and replace that non-conforming sidewalk. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So where are we at in the process? We did the inventory in 2021, and we are going to move to an annual inventory update. This year will be a little bit more work because we're going to pick up all the capital projects that have been built since 21, which is substantial. The prioritization is done annually, both for the ADA transition plan and as well as our 6-year TIP. We do that annually. That comes before you for review before it goes to council. I think Troy Pokswinski will be bringing that forward here in the near future. But then our budget, the 6-year CIP capital improvement program, that's a biannual process. However, council can make changes and update that throughout the year through the mid-buy adjustment or year-end adjustment. And then the transportation plan, it's the ADA transition plan itself will be updated on a 3 to 5 year rotation, kind of as needed. That's our plan for the future with the ADA transition plan. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. We wanted to prioritize the infrastructure that has been identified as being below standards. And it's really a kind of a logical prioritization. I think most people would come up with, half of the score would be just the facility condition itself, just like we would do in our own home. Something that really needs repaired obviously would rise to the top. Traffic volume is important. The assumption there is that higher volume roads also reflect a higher volume of pedestrian usage. I know I've seen that firsthand myself on Bridgeport, Pack Highway, South Tacoma Way, Gravelly as an example. I see much higher pedestrian usage than lower volume roads. However, we also want to make sure we acknowledge that there are other areas that have high pedestrian use just simply because of what the facility is like. So it could be St. Clair and schools, facilities like that. And then finally, complaints may sound negative, but it would be, responses that we receive for things within the right of way that need upgraded. I'll be honest, we don't get a lot of those by and large because our infrastructure is in good condition. One example that I often use is maybe someone that's sight impaired. The one that really rang true for me a number of years ago was 93rd in Bridgeport, when someone that was sight impaired kind of explained to me the difficulties of a T intersection versus a four-way intersection. So if we do get a complaint like that, it would score differently. That would bring it up in its need to be addressed. So looking at cost, again, these are big numbers because we're looking at everything, and that would be to take it to current compliance standards. So a sidewalk that is at 2.5% cross slope, which most people couldn't see that it's above 2%, but it still shows up as a item that would need to be addressed. Here we just picked, I believe this one was just for the poor condition only. So if we were to roll everything up, you can see the numbers, it gets to be pretty large. What we're going to target for our budget requests this year would be an intersection that would need the pedestrian push buttons upgraded, plus the adjoining 8 pedestrian ramps. So that's where we come up with the $260,000 a year to start with. So that would be the beginnings of a standalone plan. And again, this is just standalone. This doesn't include work that would be done through other capital projects, overlays, et cetera. So go ahead and move on. So funding, it's always good to look at where your money is. And this is not an exhaustive list of grant programs, but on the local funding, we have those funds that come in that are historically used for transportation projects. Our REIT, our real estate excise tax, general fund can always be used. Our transportation benefit district, so that's the $20 you pay extra on your car tabs, and that's been in place, I want to say, since 2008. The city can actually increase that by another $20 if they so choose without going to a vote, the citizenry. But again, car tabs are often very contentious. So currently it's the $20 that was put in place back around 2008. That money is primarily used for the general obligation bonds for all the capital work, or not all of it, for a lot of the capital work that we have seen recently in the city. So your money goes directly from the car tabs back into road projects here at the city. And when I say road projects, that includes the curb gutter, sidewalk, ped ramps, all the items within for a complete street. And then the TMF, that's the fee that's collected for development in the downtown sub area. I can't quote the current fund balance on that, but that was set up when the sub area was created to be a split 50-50 between what would be in the development and what the city would contribute. So those are your typical funding. On the grant side, the one I want to maybe highlight would be the fourth one down, Safe Routes to School and Bike and Ped. The city's we've done very well in grant funding historically, partly because of the need at incorporation, but we've done very well on the Safe Routes to School and Bike and Ped. Those grants are primarily curb gutter, sidewalk, and pedestrian ramps. I can name a lot of projects: John Dower, Park Lodge. Recently, we did the project up on Far West for Lakes High School that extended beyond the high school even. 112th in front of Clover Park High, not the full project right now, but that piece over there. See, I wrote a few of them down. Hutloff on Phillips Road, that was one of them. So the city's done well. For the Bike and Ped, that was 84th and Pine, and that brought in that signal at 84th to allow crossing into Wards Lake Park, but also to the north, it connects to the Water Ditch Trail. So that's the bike bike and ped portion as well. So city has done very well, and we appreciate the funding from both state and federal that we've received. So enough about the money. So where we find ourselves today and how we got here. So as you know, we're at that 30-year mark in our incorporation. It still feels like a new city in some ways. A lot has been done since then. We've either upgraded sidewalk and other facilities or just flat out built new. The last sidewalk project Pierce County did before incorporation was a little piece on Steilacoom Boulevard, just east of Phillips Road, on the north side of Steilacoom. That was the last piece of sidewalk the county had done. And here we just are in the process of doing the final completion of Steilacoom all the way from 87th up to Weller, and we've already done Weller up through Custer Road. So we've done quite a bit just in that little corridor, and that's really in the last 2 years' time. Let's see. So in 21 was when we did the full GIS inventory, and we actually did write a draft plan at that time, but it didn't go through the full process and adoption. 22 to 26, that list of capital projects isn't even, there's more than that. I went through it, and one that's missing is South Tacoma Way in 92nd. And that is really a ADA transition plan type project. It updates the ped ramps, but it added a traffic signal that included the current pedestrian push buttons. So quite a bit has been done just even in this last 4 years' time and through this year. And then finally, where we are moving forward to is we've already completed some of this. As I mentioned, we've done the code update and the ESM updates, and we are starting the GIS inventory updates. We'll start with the pedestrian push buttons. That one's a pretty straightforward, quick, low-hanging fruit to take care of. And then our right-of-way inspector, in his free time, will be out doing the other updates. So we'll go ahead and go along to the next slide. So where we are in the process, back at the beginning of the year, a formal web page was set up, standalone web page for the ADA transition plan. We had announcements in the city manager's bulletin back at the beginning of the year, and then most recently on March 20th, March 19th, the draft plan was put on the web page. And I can't tell you how many people I sent it out to as interested stakeholders, but it was a sizable list. Here we are at Planning Commission now. That's at step 4. Looking forward to a hearing at the next meeting, and then eventually your recommendation to the council to move forward. And then the council tentatively, we would have another study session with council, and then we would have the tentative scheduled adoption June 1st of the plan. But again, this is a living document, so we'll adopt it and then the next day be collecting data. So this will be an ongoing process. And the grievance policy or grievance process has been in place for some time. The forms are available on the city website. Our HR manager, Nicole, is the identified person. But in addition, we have the My311 process where people can notify us of issues in the right of way, as well as I receive them directly as often as well. So kind of the recommendations summarizing the next steps will be continue to update. It'll always be integrated into our capital program. We'll be looking at, our budget from year to year, and as time goes on, the budget need will be less as we knock those facilities that are non-compliant out. As Ms. Spears had mentioned, this will be added to other planning documents, as well as our non-motorized plan, which sometimes you'll hear at agencies referred to as their active transportation plan. And we'll continue with our public engagement process. We are working on the multilingual material right now, not only for this, but for other facets of the city. And with that, this is a reminder of the link to the plan, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
Does any commissioner have a question?
I have three questions, but can I ask one then?
Commissioner Estrada, go ahead.
Mr. Roth, thank you very much for your presentation. I find it very, very interesting. The whole package I learned a heck of a lot. Last meeting, we talked about truncated domes. So as I'm walking with family and friends, do you know what this is? Have no idea what that was. Sarcastic remark. It's to clean your feet before you go out or in, but people did not know. But when I told them it was ADA, very pleased, very pleased. So that's good to know. But we spoke about sidewalks. The sidewalks on Gravelly, both sides, and now Nyanza, one is 5 and the other, what, is 8 feet? Is that, I mean, why would we spend a lot of money on a larger one if it wasn't for ADA, or am I wrong? Why is it there? Why do we have such a?
Yeah, so around Gravelly Lake itself, making up Nyanza and Gravelly Lake Drive, the road, there's an inside path and it's 10 feet wide. We refer to it often as the wide sidewalk. Initially, that was planned, boy, it's getting to be quite a long time ago. I think it was somewhere in 2008 or 2010 to make a loop around the lake. We had a lot of right-of-way there. And so the concept was that would be one area that you could walk around. You would have that walking type facility. We've done similar on, well, Washington's very walkable. Veterans has a wide sidewalk, Lakewood Drive, Onyx, both east and west of 87th and Garnet. So we've built that in a number of places. What we found though is if we only put the sidewalk on the inside, how about the other side of the road? And so we were able within our budget to go ahead and put sidewalk on the opposite side of the road. But still to meet the intent of the original project to have that wider sidewalk where 2 people could pass, a bicyclist and a walker could pass. But we felt it was also important to add that sidewalk on the other side. And I think that makes the roadway look better and more usable today to have sidewalk on both sides.
On Nyanza, was that at the expense of the road itself having a wider sidewalk or having sidewalks on both sides? Now, don't you have to then make the roadway narrower?
So there was a lot of paved shoulder on Nyanza previously. That was part of the other reason why the wide sidewalk there worked. We had the right of way. Typically what we've found is making lanes wider causes people to drive faster. Having a dedicated bike lane, many times people are going away from that. The concept now is any age, any ability. So the wider sidewalk would allow, a younger bicyclist or someone with training wheels to ride their bike on that versus riding in a bike lane. But typically 11 to 12 feet. I don't have, I can't recall the plans right now, but I believe those lanes are 12-foot wide, which is pretty standard.
Thank you.
Commissioner Larson.
Just a really minor point, I think, but does the city own the sidewalks?
That is correct. And
Then early in the document, we had an exception from these rules that says city-owned properties, and perhaps that should be modified to mean city-owned buildings or whatever it is that might be specifically stated for the city. Just a real minor point.
noted, yeah. Again, it should be focused on right of way, and which is owned or easement for the city to have transportation and utility facilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Estrada.
Thank you. Mr. Ott, I looked at the ADA grievance form. that's specifically for city properties. Do you get many calls? People are complaining about lack of ADA facilities or on private or, grocery stores or such? And if so, where are they directed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be honest with you, I have not received any ADA complaints on private property. Typically, when we have on, outside city right away, outside city property, I'll use an example of, say, storm drainage flooding. Like I will get maybe a parking lot has storm drainage ponding. We contact the owner. We often have a good contact for who owns that property. We let them know. So if I were to get something about an ADA deficiency, we would probably start with a courtesy call at a minimum to the property owner.
Thank you.
I will say on development, I mean, ADA is when a new development comes in, that's of high priority. It's checked both on the, plan review permitting side, but also the construction, and we ensure there's an ADA path from that development to the road right away.
Commissioner Merritt.
I probably have more comments than you want to hear tonight.
Oh, that's fine.
But first of all, I want to commend you on what I do see happening on Gravity Lake. And also now I'm very interested now when we finally get in on Nyanza between there, because in knowing that road very well beforehand, it was like, how are we going to make sure these sidewalks are going to work? Because there's a lot of close vegetation, trees and fences there. So I'm going to be very fascinated here in, another month or something, we're going to get on that, or it's getting close. It's getting close. So that's good. The other thing I really want to commend you on is this whole issue of bike lanes. Because I think the dilemma that many jurisdictions have is those bike lanes look really nice when simple area, but what you're recognizing is always edge conditions. It's always the ends and how you transition. And how many times do you see other jurisdictions now that have nice bike lanes that end up with, what do you do? And it's dangerous. So what you have is full lane is bike lane, okay. And this whole idea of using a wider sidewalk, up in Green Lake, they do that in Seattle, where they have kind of like a bike piece of their pathway and that. So I really think that's good thinking in that. So that's good. The other thing I wanted to comment on this whole thing on ADA, it's been many decades now we've been trying to get this, and it's a mountain in that. But do you have basic diagrams that are kind of your diagrams that you can share with the public sector at all, that to kind of show them things ahead of time? Because a lot of times when you get into a project, it's kind of crisis scheduled and you're pushing on so many avenues. To know early on what the ramifications are for requirements like ADA is very beneficial to a project. And I think if there was a way of having a simple diagram or even reaching out, even do a test area to see how it works, to show people, when you do a project, this is what we would like you to do. And when you're back in your area, even on a private parking lot, you still want to have ADA things taken care of. I have seen projects, because let's face it, some of this gets to be legalese in that, where you look at, I've had a client that had somebody was their ADA, their parking stalls, that either they didn't have the rights of that, and it could become a legal issue, and they need to do. So I think there's lots of private sector people that would have a better awareness. Now, how sometimes that can happen, and this becomes a soapbox for me. This is why I have too much to say right now on these things. But before we had COVID and everything kind of shut down, everybody went home to work, in this habit of doing that, what we had much more readily available was pre-construction meetings or pre-construction conferences. And this goes beyond your needs. I know that. This goes to building department, in the bigger issues of project development, and that to understand what the pre-issues are and let the design team or the owner know what he's really up against before he gets into design components that sometimes need to be unraveled because they didn't understand, or the permit goes on too long. And that, so I guess my point is, I really hope that planning issues, and it goes beyond, again, into the building side, that pre-construction conferences are extremely beneficial for a jurisdiction, more than you understand, because it is so important that these teams that are trying to do the right thing know what the parameters are before they're down the garden path. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that dovetails well with what the city currently does. We do have the pre-application conferences that we sit down with all the utilities, engineering, planning, fire. And a recent example, a fast food restaurant that sells chicken, I'll leave it at that, was looking at a parcel, and it was actually the sidewalk cross slope was off. And so during that pre-app conference, we were able to tell them that while there is frontage there, you will be required to remove and replace that portion of sidewalk that's out of compliance, as an example. On the pre-cons, I can say on the engineering side, we hold those for all our right-of-way permits as well as our site development permits. So, and often there will be sewer, utilities, and other folks. And then often we can take care of some of the initial permit requirements, you know, after the
Well, thank you for that.
pre-con. So, yeah, so we are doing many of those things, and it's definitely,
Well, that's
I
very
hear what you're-
exciting to hear, because it's very interesting. It happened at the end of the last meeting we had. We actually talked about these pre-construction conferences. Remember, Robert, just very briefly, that helps both in the early understanding, and this plays into it. Let's face it, the ADA issues are not easy sometimes.
correct.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One last question.
Commissioner
please.
Estrada?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Me too.
I,
I think
I
you
wa-
also have sorry to interrupt, you also have your, Mr. Flores up there.
We'll move to Mr. Flores
Yeah.
next. Track him.
I'm gonna say, from my perspective, I don't think there can be any pushback on this during the public hearing. But what I foresee is that, to Mr. Mayor's point, we're gonna start talking about 80 parking spaces. They're gonna feel that, I feel that people will start talking about the lack of spaces. I know that in reading that, one ADA space for every 25 regular parking spaces, I think is a requirement, minimum. And I think that would work very well for a small doctor's office, for example. But 1 in 25 for a library probably won't work. So the federal law says 1 in 25. Can the city or state up it to, for example, 1.5 or 2 to 25? Is that within our prerogative if we felt the need?
So you got me there. I don't know the answer to that. That's where I would defer to our planner to get some assistance with that. But I can definitely follow up with the commission on answering, can we increase beyond the minimum required for ADA? I'm pretty sure that the developer could do it of their own accord, but can the city require it? I'll have to ask that question.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Standing. Spear is, Commissioner Flores unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes, I think I am. I have one question. Reviewing all these documents, how come we only have a budget of about 260,000 a year to attack this plan that seems like it's about 34 million? Do we have a plan to make sure this don't become a 100-year problem, or am I missing something there?
No, that's a great question, Mr. Flores. So part of the plan to address that is through future capital projects as well. And so it would be 260,000 plus what's in the capital plan. An example of a upcoming capital project would be Custer Road from Bridgeport Way to 75th. There's intermittent pieces of sidewalk in there, but when we're done, it'll be a holistic project from end to end with curb gutter, sidewalk, bike lane, turn lane, et cetera, a complete street. So that'll knock out a large area of poor sidewalk and barriers. So it's going to be a combination of both the ask as well as the capital program. And there is nothing that says the council couldn't increase the standalone barrier removal funding. They could go above that. But that's going to be our initial ask in this next budget, would be 260 a year. But that's a great question.
Any other questions? Mr. Ott, I have a couple. I think you were just kind of making this clear, but I just want to ask for clarity. With the budget request, the 260 plus or minus, will that be a standalone budget item or will that be rolled into a larger budget item for either a TIP or CIP contingency, or how does that actually play out in the request process?
Yeah, correct. You'll see it in the tip as it comes forward as a standalone. The way I envision this happening, and again, we still have to go make that request to the council. The council gets to make that final determination. So this is my tentative plan on how it would work. We currently have a program for, we call it minor capital, that fixes patches and other imperfections in the road that come up that are larger than an operation and maintenance group can handle. We have a similar for surface water, where it's like catch basins that's dropped or drainage issues. So then this would be, in a sense, like a minor capital program. And what we're kind of excited about is if you can package a couple of these different ones together, you have the economy of scale. You'll get a good contractor. It's a bigger project, more interest in bidding. So the way I envision it working, at least initially, would be to roll it in with our other minor capital improvements, which is really kind of what it is. And go from there. And it would come out as a complete package.
Okay. With regard to private development, you'd mentioned that if a developer wants to do a project and the infrastructure that's already in place is not compliant, then that developer automatically incurs that expense. Is there any opportunity for that developer to apply for a cost sharing mode with the city, or do they absorb 100% of that into their build out?
Yeah, typically it's 100%, because you could buy we'll just say a lot with no frontage improvements, and then you would be on the hook for everything. If there were some frontage improvements, then it would only be correcting it. And maybe that's the driveway, and maybe you have to do the driveway anyways, or you're already doing other concrete work on the project. You have to do some sidewalk work. Again, I'm not trivializing the cost because it's real cost and development. I understand, those can be impactful. But as far as I know, there's no cost sharing procedure for that.
To your knowledge, has the city missed out on any developments due to those type of fiscal decisions, I guess is the way to say that?
Yeah, I think it goes where I would see that, or where I have seen that, isn't necessarily on like an ADA transition type project where they would have to correct something. I see it more in maybe a realtor or developers looking at buying some residential lots, and one of the requirements is frontage improvements. And so they do the math, can I make 1 or 2 homes work while doing 100 foot of frontage improvements or something like that. It becomes a business decision, but I haven't really seen it from, like a large commercial chain coming in, because often they're tearing a building down or they're doing something else. So the cost of that, I think your TMF fee may be more impactful than maybe your frontage costs, like if you're in the downtown. So not to get too off topic there.
Right. One more question. Anecdotally, I think a large portion of our sidewalk projects over the last several years have been largely funded with either ARPA dollars or other grant dollars. Is that an accurate statement?
It would be other grant dollars. We have been very successful on federal and state grants. For instance, the Washington Gravelly, we called it JBLM North, Transportation Improvement Board funded that. Stillicum Boulevard, that piece I was talking about earlier, 87th to Weller, that was federal grants. There was a slide earlier, it said CMAQ, there's CMAQ and STP. That, if I remember correctly, was CMAQ, which is Congestion Mitigation Air Quality is what that acronym stands for. But we've been very successful on grants simply because they're big principal arterials. For instance, like Pack Highway, South Tacoma Way, parallel to I-5. It's really easy to tell a compelling story why the city should receive those grant funds. But when you get further into the city, there's projects that don't score well, or they're not those principal arterial projects. And that's where the council chose to use the Transportation Benefit District, the $20 car tabs, bond that money, and then that way they could do projects throughout the city that wouldn't normally score at the grants. And so that's where you find that balance in how we've been able to deliver the transportation program basically over the last 10 to 15 years.
Two more questions. They're going to be rather quick. How, if a community member wanted to quickly determine the funding source for a project that's happening in the city, is that readily accessible to them, or how might they go about finding that information?
So that's a great question. There was a comment earlier about pre-COVID. I don't remember who, maybe it was Commissioner Merritt, but in the old days, I'll say at the old days, we used to have project signs that would have, you know, who funded those projects. Those have kind of fallen out of favor. Nowadays, probably the easiest way is to have on the city website about the project would tell you how it's funded. The other way that's conclusive would be to look in the budget. So the budget for each capital project will have a detailed budget sheet that will show sources and uses for the funds for those projects. Where a lot of the projects that are coming up currently and in the next couple of years are the Sound Transit System Access Funds. We're very lucky to have received those. That's the rest of 112th out here and the Kendrick project we talked about. But the budget's probably the best way. It's not necessarily an easy way to look for how that's funded. I'd like to acknowledge that.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you so much. The last question I have is with regard to the forthcoming budget requests. Obviously, fiscal constraints are real. How confident are you that this line item is going to move forward and we'll be able to bring these ADA improvements to life in the real world?
Yeah, I think it's, again, don't have my crystal ball working right now. And like you say, you know, being realistic about budgets, I think it has a good chance though. But with that said, we're also doing a tremendous amount of work in our capital program. But I believe that there's a very good chance we'll have that funded, but I don't want to speak for the council. Should
it not get funded? Are we in a negative space from a compliance standpoint?
That's, I would say that's correct. We do need to show a process forward. We would just have to show that through our capital funded projects.
Yep. Outstanding.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Rod. This presentation was very informative. Oh,
May I please?
I apologize.
Excuse me, to follow on funding. So as we know, Washington is not a favorite son of the federal government at this time. And many of the fundings for projects have been denied from other states. You foresee that happening to us here in our state regarding transportation funds?
Yeah, that's an interesting question you pose. What I have seen recently with the federal funds isn't so much whether it's a red or blue state, which I believe is what you're alluding to.
Yes.
It's more of is that money going to be spent as part of the federal budget? So if, let's say, the federal funds that normally go to Puget Sound Regional Council and then are divided up for the corresponding counties, if those funds don't come to PSRC, then by and large, they wouldn't trickle down. However, I've seen our other grant programs that do have federal funds, they're still, those funds are still available. There's still, a competitive grant process. And if you can put in a competitive grant, you have a good chance of getting funded.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ott.
Yep,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
comment.
Appreciate.
Oh, no trouble. All right, Mr. Chair, if you're ready to move on, we're at now item number 3, and I'll just pull it up in just a second, but this is at page 117 of your packet, and it's going to be a discussion of action by the commission, on the request for a redesignation of a parcel related to the Edgewater Park under our Shoreline Master Program. So let me get to the right page. If you'll recall, there was a joint hearing this last meeting between Department of Ecology and the City of Lakewood on this proposal. But to summarize what occurred up to this point process-wise, in 2019 was the last time the Shoreline Master Program was comprehensively updated. The next time that comprehensive process will happen is in 2029. That's a 10-year process. But what we now have in front of us is what's called a locally initiated update in 2026 that is strictly limited to the proposed redesignation of one parcel to move it from shoreline residential to urban park, and that is the parcel that would be the southern tip of Edgewater Park that's being improved at the moment. The joint public hearing was held on the 18th of March. There was also a longer public comment period that ended yesterday. And so the city will be preparing responses to the comments received through yesterday at 5 p.m. and then providing that back to the Department of Ecology. But in the meantime, what this resolution says is that the Planning Commission, if it approves and recommends forwarding this along, that the locally initiated amendment of that redesignation of one parcel won't foster uncoordinated or piecemeal development of the state shorelines along whichever lake that is, I just lost it, are consistent with the standards of the Shoreline Management Act, shall meet procedural rule requirements for public notice and consultation, and that has occurred, and satisfy master program guidelines. So what the resolution says is that it is redesignating a particular parcel 308-500-2170 from shoreline residential to urban park, and that this would be something that you are forwarding on to the city council for review. Their action is not the final action. Normally it would be, but because this is a shoreline decision, that is something that the Department of Ecology actually has final action on. So this would be you recommending through this process up to the council. Council takes action, and then the Department of Ecology reviews the proposed change against the state Shoreline Management Act for consistency. So if the commission is ready to take action tonight, it would be a motion to approve Resolution 2026-04, and then that is the wording right there of what this resolution does.
Is there a motion?
I have a question. A question, sir.
Mr. Estrada?
In the report, the Shoreline Master Program was prepared by AHBL.
Uh-huh.
Just a quick question. One of the chapters is chapter 3, paragraph B5,
Do you happen to have a page number
page
down at the very bottom?
151.
Okay.
I don't think that's it.
I'm sorry, okay.
It pertains to public access. I thought it was page 151 on the bottom. Page. I guess it's not the one I have. Well, let me just ask the general question anyway. It says there that on paragraph 2, applicability, there are a number of public street ends where there may be potential for developing public access, but it doesn't specify the street ends. Is it possible to get that information for the commission?
The street ends that are available for potential opening or improvement?
Yes.
Certainly, I can provide that to you.
And it's interesting to note the public access versus public use definitions difference, but access is what we're looking at. But that's the only question I had.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll provide that to you at your next meeting, sir.
Commissioner Larson.
I'd like to speak to the motion.
Well, we don't have a motion yet, so
Okay, well, I'd like
that
to
was a general
speak-
question, but we'd entertain a motion and we can start discussion.
So moved.
The motion, is there a second? And I assume the motion is to approve this resolution.
It is.
I'll second it.
The motion and seconded to approve Planning Commission Resolution 2026-04. We can begin discussion. Mr. Larson.
Thank you. I walked down there and, well, number one, I think it's a really good idea to add this parcel to that park. It'll enhance the use of it, gives enough more size to the park to allow more wider and better use of the park. I don't think it calls for paving a parking lot at the park. I think that if the park were to be pedestrian oriented or launch a kayak and go park your car elsewhere, or in very limited ways to have automobile traffic generated on Edgewater Drive, that it would be good for the neighborhood and good for the use of the park. I think that that the manner in which the development is proposed with the money spent is excessive given the environment in which we're placing it.
Can I speak to it?
Yes, Commissioner Estrada.
Thank you. Ms. Larson, to your point, if you recall at some of the council meetings when we spoke, or they spoke of this proposed project, many of the complaints from the citizens were the parking, the streets, the traffic. Because there was no parking at the site, they parked along the street, blocking driveways and such. So that was the issue that came up. So to your point, I think we need the parking so that we don't have those complaints, or it's not a nuisance to the neighborhood, my perspective.
Certainly, just
Thank you.
Ms. Spear, as a point of clarity, this resolution has nothing to do with the plan. It purely addresses the changing of zoning. Is that correct?
This actually isn't even the zone for the property. This is the designation under the Shoreline Master Program.
Okay,
So you're correct. We're actually 2 steps away. We've got the Shoreline Master Program, which says there are certain uses that can be allowed around a lake or along a larger creek. Then you have the land use zone, which is something that across the city, every parcel has. What are the allowed uses? Is it residential, commercial, what have you? That's going to be in front of you as part of the big 2026 Comprehensive Plan Amendment package. And then once, assuming both of those were to be approved, it's an application process just like anything else. Parks Department will be going through a review process of this park, including whether or not that master plan goes forward as you saw it or if it will change.
yeah. And to both of the commissioners' points, I think there's a lot more discussion around this topic. Obviously, a lot of interest from citizens who live in that area and more broadly through the city. I think 2 very good points brought up here tonight. We've heard at multiple public comment and public hearing sessions regarding the execution of a park in that space and what that may or may not look like and how that may continue to develop. But I am in favor of this designation because it allows that conversation to continue in a responsible manner. I will be supporting this.
Agreed.
Commissioner Merritt?
I'm a visual person. Do you have a site plan of that proposal that is not on the table now, but at least could you just kind of show us that one again that we looked at last time? I don't know if it's on your, on your, on the computer.
If you give me a moment, Mr. Chair, I can try to open that up on our website.
But
Please go ahead.
I do agree with you that, but we do need to have that, like, because of respect for a number of citizens' comments that we had last meeting. We need to thoughtfully look, but what I'd also like to see is the right-of-way space around there and the impacts around that whole area, because there are other ways to do this design, but we need to know so it doesn't become an unintended consequence to another little adjacent area.
Certainly. There's always intended and unintended consequences. There are
important.
also the realities of human nature, which we've seen and we've heard about many times in the public hearing on this topic, right? It's like Ms. Spears getting that pulled up now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where did that go?
Well,
What just happened?
May I speak?
Yes, Commissioner Larson.
Clearly, my point is misplaced, and we're here to vote on getting the park approved to be a park, and the rest of the discussion can happen later.
Well,
So I withdraw my earlier comment.
thank you.
So to respond to what Commissioner Merritt was just asking about, this is the area of the parcel that we're talking about having the redesignation under the Shoreline Master Program. This, as you see, is actually a 2-year-old master plan now. It was from April of 2024. And as I said just now, if the redesignation occurs and the rezone occurs of that parcel, so the Edgewater Park could actually utilize this additional piece, this master plan is still subject to change as the permit review for it actually proceeds. So this is it's drafted as an adopted master plan, but it is subject to change when it comes to execution.
Is there any other discussion?
Call for the question.
Go ahead. Okay, call the question. All right. So it has been motioned and seconded that we approve Planning Commission Resolution 2026-04, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Lakewood, Washington, formalizing its recommendations regarding locally initiated updates to the Shoreline Master Program and forwarding its recommendations to the Lakewood City Council for consideration and action as presented with no amendment. All those in favor of approving the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying no. The motion carries and is approved. The resolution is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will move to the final item for this evening, which should be relatively brief. Now in your packet, I'm going to jump down to page 247, almost to the end. And what this is the rules of procedure for how the Planning Commission operates. So these are not the sections of the Lakewood Municipal Code establishing the Planning Commission. This is what is actually kind of your day-to-day rules of operation. And so it starts out, first of all, just explaining that you are a planning commission. A few years ago, this body used to be called the Planning Advisory Board. It's since been changed to be the Planning Commission. There's the officers listed and explained. There's the Planning Commission clerk explained. The red and the underlined text here is what is in front of you for amendment this evening. The task forces is what are going to be addressing the natural environment and climate change program that we talked about earlier this evening. And the way it's written right now, they are limited to 5 members. And so the recommendation coming before you is to actually take out a specific number and just have that sentence read, task forces may be composed of subject matter experts and community members as needed, and then maximum of 3 members from the Planning Commission, meaning there could be fewer, but that would be the maximum. So that's one edit. The other edit is the task forces. There's already language in the rules of procedure, but the addition here would be a sentence that says, "The scope of work and items discussed will follow city council direction." And that is the only two changes to your rules of procedure, which, if you'll recall, those of you that were here, were updated in 2025. So if you're ready to do so, it would be a motion to approve, with or without amendment, these two changes to the Planning Commission's rules of procedure.
Commissioner Lars.
I propose we accept the edits as written without change.
It has been motioned that we approve edits to rules of procedure for the Lakewood Planning Commission as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded that we approve Planning Commission rules of procedure. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Merritt?
I just have it's probably just a question, but a lot of jurisdictions are when they have commissions that are on then another subgroup, sometimes they're not allowed to vote. They're just advisory. So does this allow the planning commission members to be full voting members of the task force? That's my question.
The way the rules of procedure are written, the Planning Commission member, up to 3 in this case, would be part of that task force, but it's up to the task force to decide how it would be operated. And so whether the Planning Commission member would be ex officio or a voting member will be determined.
That comes by the task force. then.
Right.
So but there's no dictation in the normal rules of that, because that
Correct.
does happen.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? All right, it has been motioned and seconded that the City of Lakewood Planning Commission rules of procedures be amended or be changed as presented with no amendments. All those in favor of the changes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying no. The motion is approved. Ms. Spear?
All right, Mr. Chair, there are no other items for you this evening. Commissioner Talbot is unavailable tonight, so there's no council updates. Our next meeting will be on April 15th. And again, that will be an additional detail regarding the members of your task forces. If you could think about which one of those task forces you might be interested in, I'll send an email out as well. But remember, there's 4. And if you want to volunteer for multiple ones, you, I think, can. But the idea is that somebody is on each one of them from the Planning Commission, and there's 4 and there's 7 of you. So that may be a discussion on the 15th as well. And then we'll also have the public hearing for the ADA transition plan. And there's one other thing, but I can't recall what it is. So, but that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Does any commissioner have anything for the good of the order? No. Seeing none, hearing none, I would just all remind you that we have many service members around the world in harm's way doing the bidding of our government. And I would ask you to keep them in your thoughts and prayers as you move throughout the week.